So, on page 19 of Tantric Techniques, there's a discussion of space-like meditative equipoise. So, well, in this case, we've been, I say we, you know what we, I mean, we've been meditating on the selflessness of persons, right? Does the selflessness of persons cancel the existence of persons? No, no.
Conventional existence.
What?
Not the conventional existence.
Not the conventional existence of persons. What about the existence of persons? You say it does cancel the existence of persons, but not the conventional existence of persons.
No, but we use the word existence when we say inherent existence, so you almost want to have an adjective there to be specific about what you're talking about. No, it doesn't cancel the existence.
Yeah, then
Thinking of
then it
existence.
comes. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt.
No, unless you're thinking of existence as a sort of reified thing.
So so I guess my question now is, within the system, when the word existence is used, what is meant by it? In general. Wrong. Got everybody to walk into that one. It's conventional existence. So in general. Now when you talk about the selflessness of persons, right, that type of existence that's being refuted is inherent existence. Or when Buddha says existence is one extreme, that's not the general existence, conventional existence. It's inherent existence. And then he says non-existence is another extreme. Non-existence doesn't mean no inherent existence, right? Because that's not an extreme. Non-existence means utter non-existence, negating even conventional existence. Yeah.
Everything that I thought I got out of last year,
Yeah.
apparently it's wrong, is the Gelugpa position is to be incredibly suspicious of the phenomenal world because
Yes.
because we're too
Yes.
loose with our language.
Yes.
When we say existence, we may even think that we're talking about conventional existence, but we really don't experience existence that way. We really
Right.
experience existence as basing our attachment onto it as being inherent.
Yeah,
So now you're telling me that when the system says existence, it really means conventional existence and not inherent existence.
well, it's just to say, does a pot exist when you're in the debating courtyard and you have to answer that question? You don't answer no, because it does exist. His points are all very good. One is being taught to be suspicious of the phenomenal world, suspicious of the seeming status of the phenomenal world. And then, of course, there's the subtle question about whether we have any valid perception of the phenomenal world at all. And Gelugpa is on intent on saying, even if everything appears wrong, we're not always paying attention to the status. We just pay attention, I was noticing that there's somebody across the hall. Just noticing that there's someone there, and is that perception entirely wrong? Somebody is there. But, if I noticed that the person was handsome or whatever and began to get desirous or, whatever you can imagine, that then I'll be paying attention to the wrong status. It's the only way desire and so forth can get started, the claim is when you pay attention to the wrong status. So what is this in-between world like? That, is it gray? As the Dalai Lama said one day when I pressed him on this issue, he said, well, when you pay more attention to the object, then you're getting into the inherent existence of the object. So you mean you... what are you supposed to do, Now, the existence of objects is not being refuted. So the emptiness of inherent existence is not a negative or negation of the existence of the object, but a negation of the inherent existence of the object. Now, when you realize emptiness, then why is it space-like meditative equipoise? That suggests the object isn't appearing anymore. In space-like meditative equipoise, you had it in your paper recently, I haven't read it. Does the object appear?
I would say no.
It doesn't. What does appear?
The absence of the inherent existence.
Of the object. And that's all. So despite the fact that the emptiness of the inherent existence of an object does not cancel the existence of the object, when you realize emptiness in space-like meditative equipoise, the object doesn't appear at all. Why? Why is it like that?
The question is the realization of the emptiness of the inherent existence of an object not dependent upon the object? How can we...
Is the emptiness of inherent existence of an object a quality of the object? Yes or no? He says yes. He's nodding his head. She says no. What?
It's one entity with the object.
Answer the question.
No.
No. People say, yes, it is.
It's a quality of the emptiness is a quality of the object.
Yes.
It's a quality of the reality.
It is the reality of the object, but it is also a quality of the object. As you're saying, it's one entity with the object. It depends upon the object depends upon it, both ways. Without it, the object couldn't exist. Without the object, emptiness. The emptiness of the object can't exist. But, you see, it's said that when you talk about emptiness, you have to use many buts. I forget what the day. You who are memorizing the grammar, is it just day or in day? You have to use many buts. But when you realize emptiness directly, nothing appears to that consciousness except emptiness.
And what does that look like?
I will qualify it, except for a Buddha. And for a Buddha, both appear. Both the object and the emptiness that qualify the object appear simultaneously. So now, what does it look like? It looks like a mere absence, which is why it's called space-like. What is space? Space is an absence of obstructive contact. Obstructive, you can see obstructive contact. Now, Is there an absence of obstructive contact here? No. No. Anybody want to say yes? Anyone insane enough to say yes?
Yeah, I'm insane enough to say yes.
Okay. Why?
There's an absence of obstructive contact there because the contact you are experiencing is only in your own mind. It's not established in
Extreme of
reality.
nihilists.
Yes,
Extreme nihilists.
because there has to be a space there for the desk to occupy.
Yes, there has to be an absence of obstructive contact here for the desk to be here. The reason why I can't put my finger through it is because the desk is here. Not because there isn't an absence of obstructive contact here. Therefore, space exists everywhere where there's a physical object. Everywhere. So you see, space as a metaphor for emptiness is very, it's more than just a mere absence. It's also something that exists everywhere, physically.
So, Jeffrey,
Yes.
if in space-like meditative equipoise, the mere absence of inherent existence appears, are there meditative equipoises in which the object appears?
Well, you could speak about meditative equipoise realizing impermanence or something like that.
But it wouldn't be a space-like meditative equipoise, correct?
No.
What kind of meditative equipoise would it be?
Meditative equipoise realizing impermanence. Yes.
Even though the object isn't appearing, aren't you only realizing the emptiness of whatever the object of meditation is?
Yes. Oh, now, when you realize emptiness, we've got many topics sort of scrunched together here that I'm jumping between. When you directly perceive emptiness, you perceive the emptinesses of all phenomena in all universes. You don't do so serially. You do so instantaneously, all of them at the same time, past, present, and future. So you're realizing emptinesses, and it would kind of look like, again, sort of the mind realizing many emptinesses, but it's said very tricky on this. The factor of their difference does not appear. Therefore, you can speak about realizing emptiness in meditative equipoise. And the consciousness and emptiness are like water poured in water. I don't know why, but in this context they use water poured in water. In other contexts, like what we were reading about for today, it was milk and water. That I don't think there's any significance at all. You would think so. Anyway, if you pour water in water, you can't say, once they're poured together, that this is the water from this vessel and this is the water from that vessel, right? Emptiness and the mind realizing it are so fused. So in many Buddhist traditions, that well, how are you going to talk about this? How are you going to talk about that? You could say, well, you could still say emptiness is the final nature of objects. The consciousness, the wisdom consciousness, because no sense of difference between it and emptiness, and among the many emptinesses, appears to it, nor does it register them. Despite that fact, the consciousness is not emptiness, and emptiness is not the consciousness. This is a typical Gelugpa way of handling this profound state. Even though the two are like so, Oh, and then you would use, and you would say, emptiness and wisdom consciousness realizing it are different. This is like from an outsider's point of view, the person who's looking at the situation of meditation. And then you resort to an analog, like water poured in water, to convey the sense of how one they are. Another solution would be to say that these two combined are reality. Why not? That when you get down to it, what the final nature of things is can be, in a negative way, be expressed as an absence of inherent existence, and as a positive way, some lucid type of consciousness. And there are many Buddhist systems in Tibet and in East Asia that speak of the final reality this way and talk about, because emptiness is unchanging and permanent, they then talk about a Vajra mind, a diamond mind that is permanent. All sorts of vocabulary that make reality be mental.
That is permanent? The Vajra mind is permanent, you say?
Yes. And so then you even have a permanent mind, which in Gelugpa terms is next to unthinkable, right? Because you're taught from little childhood on up that consciousness is all impermanent, and even a Buddha's consciousness is impermanent, even though it goes on forever and so forth. But still, they use the vocabulary of emptiness and the wisdom consciousness realizing it as being like water and water. They want to have their cake and eat it too, right? As any system does. So then, if we take a step forward to Buddhahood, a Buddha's omniscient consciousness is spoken of as having two aspects: knowing how and knowing how means, I usually translate as knowing the mode of being. That means emptiness. And knowing the varieties of phenomena. But they aren't separate, in that the one knowing the varieties of phenomena knows emptiness, and the one knowing emptiness knows the varieties of phenomena. But in order to be able to talk about the fullness of the omniscient consciousness itself, well, even the hair of a Buddha, the fingernails of a Buddha realize all phenomena, all emptinesses and all phenomena. Even the house of a Buddha realizes all phenomena. This is where it's really come together. Prior to this time, in direct perception of emptiness, only emptiness appears. And then there's a state subsequent to meditative equipoise, which realizes the varieties of phenomena. Of course, it's not our usual old understanding of phenomena, but is tremendously impacted with this understanding of emptiness. But it's no longer like directly perceiving emptiness. You know, it's not the mere appearance of phenomena prevents direct perception of emptiness. doesn't prevent perception of emptiness.
How long could you last in this direct perception of emptiness where there's only emptiness? It seems like you wouldn't be able to last very long.
Well, it's an interesting question of how long. Certainly hours, days, and
So there's nothing.
hmm?
I mean, I'm just amazed there's absolutely nothing.
Nothing
Just-
appears except the emptiness of inherent existence, which is being realized. Don't think of it as without realization.
But there's no objects. I mean, when
The
if you're
object-
sitting down, the whole room disappears, you disappear, everything.
Correct. There's no, your body isn't appearing, even your mind isn't appearing, but you are realizing emptiness throughout it, and which is specifically the absence of inherent existence. Yes,
So does that mean you also don't see conventional existence?
you don't. You don't. And what you're seeing doesn't contradict conventional existence, however. Now, why is it that you can, that the state of realizing, well, now let's go back. What about inference? Well, let me say, Tsongkhapa, meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness. We speak about direct, and we're talking here about direct perception of emptiness. Early in his life, he said that this was with appearance, meaning the object also appears. And later in his life, he decided the object doesn't appear. In Tibetan, those words are nang je and nang me. Nyamsha, meditative equipoise, is nyamsha. I don't know if it's always pausha or sharp. It might be kausha or sharp. And nyamsha nang je and nyamsha nang me. He switched. And in 14th century Tibet, there was discussion of this issue. I don't know all the ins and outs of the discussion. So his final opinion is without, that meditative equipoise is without appearance of the object. But meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, is fully concordant with the appearance of objects, because inherent existence doesn't cancel the existence of objects. I don't know much about Chinese Buddhism, but those of you who has studied Zhiyi's Three Truths theory, you know, he needed some third thing to connect emptiness and the appearance of the objects. Because emptiness is too negative, object, I suppose, is too positive, needed a third thing. Something like that. Anyway, just when you hear about it, come back and tell me. Now, in this case, the object of negation is so delimited to just inherent existence that emptiness is fully compatible, I mean, it's claimed, with dependent arising, the appearance of objects. The appearance of objects is fully compatible with emptiness. You don't need some third thing. Now, let's move back to an inferential consciousness realizing emptiness. Is it with appearance of the object or without appearance of the object? Hmm?
Without impression. With,
Inferential?
With the appearance of the object.
There are different opinions on this object, on this question. Some say even in this case, What's appearing is an absence of inherent existence, and what you're ascertaining is an absence of inherent existence.
I have a question going back just a second. So are you saying dependent arising affects conventional as well as inherent existence?
It affects how it's only, you said the emptiness of inherent existence or dependent arising?
As a dependent arising, like does dependent arising cause the conventional existence of an object as well as us believing it inherently exists? Does that make any sense?
We misinterpret the dependent arising of objects. You know that objects are produced and depends on causes. This draws us into thinking, misthinking that objects inherently exist.
Right.
But when you understand dependent arising properly, the very dependence of objects means that they don't inherently exist. Therefore, the dependent arising, when properly thought on, dependent arising is used as a reason to understand emptiness.
Okay.
Now, I still haven't answered your question, which was?
Does that, how, if at all, does that relate to the conventional existence of an object?
When you refute the inherent existence of the object, then you can understand that objects merely merely conventionally exist.
Yes.
Merely.
Just adding a vocabulary of dependent arising, merely dependent, or mere dependent arising. They say that.
Yes. Now, even, of course, practitioners aren't just jumping into true space-like meditative equipoise. But you fake it. You imitate it. You go through the reasonings, and what you're seeking to do is to disturb your sense of findability of yourself, your body, the object that you're angry at, the object that you're desirous of, and so forth, right? Disturb it, at minimum. And then imitate a sense of not finding the object. So you're looking for the object, but what you're finding is the absence of inherent existence. Yes, that was my basic question. You see, the sense of going into meditative equipoise, space-like meditative equipoise is that you are looking for this solidly existent object. And what you're finding is the utter absence of that. It need not be that what you find is some dependently arisen object. You with me? Because these emotions were so built on this filthy scum person, right? That when you search to find the filthy scum person and don't find that filthy scum person, you're really impressed with the absence of that filthy scum person. And you're not necessarily impelled right on to say, oh yes, the dependently arisen person and has this quality and that quality and so forth, right? Because your concern at the moment is with this more concretely existent being or object. So you see, now I don't know, the fifth Dalai Lama gives the example of the person hunting for the, isn't it, cow or bull? Cow? And the person's got 3 fields, which are obviously then fenced. That person goes in the first field, closes, looks around. Field isn't that big, right? Doesn't have forests and so forth that the cow could be lost in. And then looks in the second one, and then closes the gate to that one, looks in the third one, and is tremendously impressed with the absence of the cow. Well, I think you'd also be impressed that the cow's somewhere else, right? In this case, because the cow exists. With inherent existence, you have delimited the possibilities to those 3, or 2, or 7, or whatever. If you have, you see? And then you know it does not exist. And the implications of this are so profound that the state of realization is space-like, as opposed to something having appearance, nunche.
Don't you think that in practice, by knowing, that things are not inherently existent, in a way it reduces the power of that effect when you're searching? In a way you kind of know the answer.
You don't know it.
No, but you know it intellectually and you kind of...
You don't. Well, I'm jumping in too quickly. That's, if you must have learned by now that that's my habit. And then I'll drink some water until you speak. Then I'll jump.
I'm just thinking that if we just do the first part and we just say, okay, just look for it, and the wood
Yes.
would be coming.
Yes. It might seem that way. It's like you're programming the result. You're saying, identify the object of negation, go through the reasonings. You won't find it, and you'll come up with a space-like experience. And my teachers, I have one really grand teacher who told me this so many times. It had to be thousands of times. He was just indoctrinating me, programming me, so that it would happen. And that's why I say in a good deal of meditation, it's like you're programming yourself that way. And you say, well, at this point I'm not supposed to find it, so I'll pretend I don't find it. And, and you do. You say, oh, space. You stay in that for a while, and it's sort of comfortable, and you reappear and feel pretty good, and, get pissed off and do whatever you usually do. But that type of ritual, which is the reading of the text and the reflection on the text and debating on it and hearing it from teachers and engaging in this type of imitative meditation starts a pattern which, when by whatever circumstances you really become serious about it, make it probably help to induce the actual process, which then, when it does happen, is a total shock. Total shock. And each time you go through it is a total shock. Total. Because what you've been doing in the meantime has been built on the opposite. How could it not be a shock? No matter how much. Yes.
How is this different from, let's say, the state of Nirodha Samapati, where you hear about people going in meditation and the house burns down, but they're still alive inside it? Is this a similar state where there's...
But this could be done also. The difference is that here, the meditative equipoise of cessation there's a sort of usual one, and there's also one that realizes emptiness. If you take the usual one, the difference is that it's not realizing the emptiness of inherent existence and cannot undermine afflictive emotions and so forth the way realization of emptiness can. But in terms of utter withdrawal and so forth, which I think can also happen with calm abiding. Somebody come cut off your ear, you wouldn't know it. I don't, anyway, don't test anymore. Yes, especially
If
me.
all that appears is an absence of inherent existence, what makes you come out of the meditation?
It said having previously set up to come out. But I always wonder if you forgot to set it up.
Yeah, you didn't know it was going to happen that day.
Yeah. Or you're, who knows? Yes.
Also, if in direct perception you're only perceiving emptiness and not the object, then how can, I don't understand in deity yoga why you can get appearances when you're starting out with this understanding.
That's what's so different in deity yoga. You keep the object there at the same time.
Then are you a Buddha?
No, but you're not directly perceiving emptiness.
And the inferential cognizer, I'm sorry, did you say that the appearances, or was that a topic of debate?
It's a topic of debate. Some people say
There are
take one
appearances.
side, some the other.
But inference is based on its reasoning.
Yeah, but even if it's based on that, when you, for instance, when we see smoke billowing up outside at all, we draw the conclusion very fast that there's fire. We don't keep thinking where there's smoke, there's fire, here there's smoke, hence there's fire. And then we take one step toward the door, and then we say, wherever there's smoke, there's fire, here there's smoke, therefore there's smoke. We follow? And it's really, because we tend to put down inference as if that's what it's like, as if you're always thinking about it.
It's just sort of a trigger, then?
The reasonings are triggers for the realization. And the only thing that's different about the realization is it's not direct. And what does not direct mean? Well, direct means not having the 5 types of duality. So the appearance of inherent existence, appearance of difference, appearance of subject and object, appearance of conventionalities. Conventional objects mean things other than emptiness. Yeah, I got all 5 today. Usually I only get 4. Appearance of conceptual images. Now, in inferential consciousness, I have some problem with settling. It would have an appearance of subject and object, the subject realizing emptiness and the object emptiness, even if you weren't ascertaining it. But on low levels, you'd be ascertaining it anyway. You'd have a sense of, this is the consciousness and this is the emptiness. Appearance of difference, yes. Appearance of inherent existence. It's often said that the emptiness of inherent existence appears to inherently exist. There are problems in that, but perhaps more theoretical than practical. Yes. So this, it seems, yes.
I'm getting confused now between the difference between appearing and ascertaining, because when I hear the word appear in that context, it sounds like something is doing something.
Yes, appearing. Ascertain means you're really paying attention to that. For instance, in Deity Yoga, which you mentioned, this wisdom consciousness, which is realizing emptiness, itself appears as a deity. And then you keep going on paying attention to its emptiness. So there are 2 factors to the one consciousness: appearance factor and ascertainment factor. The appearance factor of the consciousness, you're training to appear as a deity, while the ascertainment factor goes on realizing emptiness. It's hard to do. For instance, when the single moon, when I take off my glasses, the single moon appears to be double. I know right away, I ascertain right away that there's a single moon. Really, it's as simple as that. Appearance factor and ascertainment factor. Or wearing sunglasses, when you remember colors. You know, and you know while you're seeing it that that wall is not red, for instance. Other times you don't. But in this case, the appearance of the deity and the ascertainment of the emptiness of an inherent existence of the deity, that compatibility you are understanding, you know, these two are contained within one consciousness.
Like a Buddha, the Omniscient Consciousness.
But it's not a direct perception of emptiness. It's more like a Buddha's omniscient consciousness than separately practicing compassion and separately practicing wisdom. But they aren't that separate also. In other words, you do compassion exercises which motivate your perception of emptiness, motivate your wisdom practice, and also have some carryover during it. But it's just carryover. And having realized emptiness or impermanence or whatever, and then dealing with objects again, there's some carryover. But it's just carryover. As opposed to within one consciousness, the two factors being complete. This, Tsongkhapa says, is the distinctive feature of Tantra. It's a brilliant, very evocative and interesting, very rich way of going about it. All of the other presentations are just as rich, but rich in in very different ways. Yes?
We're stuck on the Buddhist perspective a little bit. Just with regard to this, with 4 and 5 there, can a Buddha have a direct non-dual perception of the conventionalities or conventional conceptual images?
Now, the inferential consciousness, if you say that it is without appearance, I suppose there wouldn't be appearance of conventionalities. If you say it's with appearance, then it has conventionalities. Conceptual images, obviously, it's a conceptual consciousness. Now, a Buddha's, a consciousness of meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness, or a Buddha's omniscient consciousness knowing the mode of being of objects, this part of it, has none of these. Has none of them. It's this state of meditative equipoise is, what did you say? Something like, I've never talked about it this way, but it's like the dominant icon or something like that of the culture. And when you're taught it, it's why my teacher thousands of times talks about it. It's like there is this state that contradicts all of this garbage that you're living in. And it's, I think it's there throughout most, not throughout most, does that make sense? Indian culture. Now, a Buddha's omniscient consciousness, we take knowing the varieties, there is appearance of difference. You see, within there being this consciousness of total non-duality, there's a dualistic consciousness. The bottom one is a dualistic consciousness. In Japanese Buddhism, sometimes people talk about non-dual dualism. There must be also dual non-dualism, right? Everybody tries to stitch it together somehow, to have both parts. So then there's appearance of subject and object, but not the way we have it, right? And not the way we have a sense of difference. It's like what you were talking about at the beginning. If you apply our sense of these, how to what a Buddha's sense of difference or of subject and object, doesn't make sense. It's not, because within that very same state, a Buddha has a totally non-dualistic consciousness operating at the same time. And it's the same consciousness. So a Buddha also has appearance of conventionalities. But that a Buddha's consciousness is only direct perception. Thus, there is no appearance of conceptual images from a Buddha's own point of view. Carefully qualified. And there is no appearance of inherent existence, because Buddha's gotten beyond all appearance of inherent existence whatsoever. But these two also appear because they appear to other persons. By way of their appearing to other beings, they appear also to a Buddha, because the Buddha is omniscient, blah, blah, blah. Very helpful list. So, in many practice traditions, in Tibet, there is emphasis on sitting in an empty state, space-like state, empty state, with more or less emphasis on reasoning, sometimes with no emphasis on reasoning at all. And I suppose the two extremes of this type of practice would be on the one hand, getting so involved in the reasonings that you couldn't get to the space-like state, even in imitation, involved in the reasonings on a very petty level. And the other extreme would be to zonk out in a space-like state, and from a Buddhist perspective, to be doing no more than what the Buddha himself put down as an inferior path. In a state of limitless space. So, you've sought for the object, whatever it is, not found it, and then remained in that state of non-finding. And if the state weakens, you analyze a little bit more to bring it back. Not analyzing too much so that your mind won't become fractured and excited. If it weakens again, you analyze, stabilize, alternating these. And then when you leave the state of meditative equipoise, which doesn't necessarily mean standing up or changing position, but just you pay attention to objects, then objects reappear within a context of being empty of the way they appear. They appear to be inherently existent, but you realize them to be empty of inherent existence.
It's strange that in some way that if you realize the emptiness of one particular object, that there's the same sort of, I want to call it inference, like when you see the smoke and the fire, you automatically know that all objects are empty of inherent existence. There's that kind of, so you don't have to do it serially, there's that all at the same time. You think it's strange that there's that, but yet, you can't look at the, when you look at the object, all that appears is the non-findings. Like you don't realize that by the same token the cow is somewhere else.
I didn't get the last part.
It's just mixing another metaphor. Again, for the Buddha, they appear together, but for someone on the path, it's because they're so overwhelmed with the non-finding that they don't understand its implications.
Oh yeah, but you still understand emptiness. You're going perhaps too far. It's not that you're overwhelmed and forget emptiness. You do remember emptiness.
Or
up to a certain point.
Or objects.
Yes.
Conventional.
Yes. But you're no longer in a totally non-dual state realizing emptiness. That's all. Don't go too far. Aryadeva says, a viewing consciousness realizing the emptiness of one object is a viewing consciousness realizing the emptiness of all objects. Is this true with respect to all cognitions of emptiness? So now how do you think about this? How many types of cognitions of emptiness are there? That's how to go about it. What are the types?
Valid. Are you including in that invalid?
Cognition here just means valid cognition.
And inferential and direct.
Inferential and direct. So in direct cognition of emptiness, does that one consciousness realize the emptiness of all objects?
Indirect?
Yes. 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 What about in inferential? Yeah.
It should too.
What?
I think it should too.
You think it should too. Why? Because Aryadeva said so.
Because if you are inferring and you're getting to the emptiness, that emptiness is the same for all, and you are one emptiness is the same for all.
But does the one consciousness realize the emptiness of all objects? It's said that through turning your mind to any other object, you will understand its emptiness without any further cogitation, and merely through the functioning of that former consciousness. But that means they happen serially. So the first consciousness does not realize the emptiness of something else, but through its functioning, which in Tibetan is te chevala tene, it depends upon its cheva, its action, its functioning. Te chevala tene, you can realize the emptiness of any other object your mind turns to. Therefore, it's said, if you want to test yourself on whether you realize the emptiness of, for instance, yourself, the Dalai Lama said once in lecture 1972, reflect on the emptiness of your tongue. And if that appears to inherently exist, if the understanding doesn't carry over to your tongue, what is that a sign of? You thought you realized the emptiness of mere existence of I. You switch to the topic of tongue. You're stuck at correct assumption. You're not at the level of inference. You haven't understood the absence of inherent existence of I. Otherwise, it'll apply to anything. As long as, you get tired, you go to sleep, you forget your realization of emptiness, yes. So you have to choose some pithy topics. Difficult topics, yes.
I'm thinking here, supposing we have a pot and we meditate on the emptiness of that pot, its absence of a self-existent nature and its interdependent origin and so on, and we realize that, and then we go into this space-like equipoise, and then after a time goes by, we wake up or we come back into normal functioning, and we drink our tea out of the pot. And seems like a normal thing to do. What if we transfer that problem to the problem of an emotion like lust or anger or greed? Having realized the emptiness of the greed or the anger or the emotional state involved, in this state of equipoise, when we come back from this state of equipoise, will that emotional entanglement remain as such, just as the pot remained as such? Is that a question with us?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I think it's more, you're pointing to a more complex situation. The path originally appeared to be inherently existent, then you understood it to be absent of inherent existing. Then when you come out of meditative equipoise, you realize that it's like illusion. It doesn't revert back to the old way. It's like illusion, appearing one way and existing another way. And sort of peripherally, any attachments that you had to the part, as we say in England, to the pot, have lessened when you come back. So if, rather than a pot or something like that, the topic is greed, say, then, and you reflect on the absence of inherent existence of that, then what's going to reappear afterwards? Is greed going to reappear afterwards, but slightly diminished? I wouldn't think so, because the greed itself is dependent upon the conception of inherent existence. But it would depend on your level, okay? If you're sort of at the beginning level, maybe some greed would be there, but it would be somehow mitigated, to a certain degree. But otherwise, you've undermined the very possibility of greed. So as long as the functioning of that previous realization was there, greed couldn't be there. But wanting tea could be there, which in Tibetan you can translate as durba. So this then distinguish between two types of greed, well, I don't know, greed wouldn't be a good word, desire, afflicted desire and non-afflicted desire, such as the desire for enlightenment. Desire for enlightenment, it said, does not depend at all on the conception of inherent existence. Therefore, you realize emptiness. In fact, your wish for enlightenment increases, your desire for enlightenment increases, because it doesn't depend on this misconception at all, even if that misconception is involved, which it usually is, right? I'd like to become enlightened, that everybody will think I'm unusual, and when I go to the next reception, instead of paying attention to all these movie stars, people will pay attention to me because I'll have this big gold bump on top of my head, and saying, what's that? And I really would have made it, and despite the fact that my brothers picked on me, I'll be all right. Finally. That must be part of it too, isn't it? But you see, those types of motivations drive me, say, to want to get back with my brothers, and are undermined by the process of reflecting on the emptiness of inherent existence. Whereas whatever they feed into wanting to attain Buddhahood, they certainly drop out. But that doesn't make the wish for enlightenment have to drop out. Yeah, somebody, yeah.
When you directly perceive emptiness, are you creating a consciousness that directly, like a wisdom consciousness that perceives it directly, or is it like based, or is that realization based on a consciousness that, like, before, is it like transforming another consciousness that used to see inherent existence?
Maybe say transforming a counterproductive one, or maybe uncovering a a primordially present wisdom. Third possibility. A lot of systems, both in Tibet and in East Asia, say the third. And in Gelugpa, they don't like to say this. That even though there is a fundamental innate mind of clear light, it is not a wisdom. Because if it were wise, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. Look at this sort of a cute statement. Cute, but it's also food for thought. Now, the non-concept, sorry, this is the issue. The issue between the first two is, it's a mental consciousness that is realizing emptiness directly. And if you are realizing emptiness directly, how do I say it? If you had done it before, you would necessarily, I believe, be aware of it. So this would be an initial creation. It's the first time. And then it'll go from here. It's not something you can fall from. Direct cognition of emptiness, even if you can forget it, and its functioning is not operating, you can't fall from it. What it has accomplished, it's accomplished. And that may become clearer later. But what you do is, at that point of the initial direct cognition of emptiness, you overcome all artificially acquired obstructions. All.
Is that from lifetime to lifetime, Jeffrey? Or just one?
Yeah, forever. So, this is a mental consciousness. It's new, so it was developed. But it is taking the consciousness that first conceptually realizes emptiness and making it, you're going through a process of meditation that's making it non-conceptual. So I say it's both. It's a new consciousness, in that you know that this is the first time you directly realize emptiness. But it's a case of the second, in that it used to be a conceptual consciousness, and now it has become non-conceptual. Now there are discussions about whether this is possible for the conceptual to become non-conceptual. Now those people who hold that it's not possible, then are forced, not about forced, prefer the third position. You follow? That you're uncovering something that's already there. Because the conceptual can't become non-conceptual. So I've got a place where Tsongkhapa treats this. I translated very quickly last year, and I'll include it. I've got a small packet of things which he's showing that it is, from his point of view, it's possible to transform the conceptual into the non-conceptual.
So Jeffrey, if a tulku realizes emptiness directly in one lifetime and then takes rebirth, does that mean that he does not need to cognize it in his next lifetime?
Does not need to newly cognize it, because the person has already does not need to newly achieve the path of seeing. This person's already achieved the path of seeing. All right? But the word tulku in Tibetan, tulku, means emanation body. Only Buddhas have emanation bodies. And if there were really emanation bodies, they'd all be Buddhas. And they wouldn't have to do any of this, newly at all.
Okay, I misspoke. How about simply a recognized reincarnated Lama who, I mean, in the sense that, okay, he wouldn't be born with a direct realization of emptiness, would he?
Why not? She. Why wouldn't she? Just giving you a hard time. So, you know, it's baloney. No, I shouldn't be. So then you can say, well, then why do these people need to be trained?
Right.
Well, then they're pretending they need to be trained. And you could say to that, well, if you believe that, you'll believe anything, right?
Maybe they need to be trained in the methods, but they know already.
Oh,
Able to teach it.
oh, oh. Here's something that got started in Tibet, recognition of reincarnations, and then everybody had to recognize reincarnation somehow, all over those. You were asking, why is there a Panchen Lama when you have a Dalai Lama? Well, there's how many thousand of reincarnated lamas in Tibet? And every valley has to have its own person. Just as we have to have our own, you know, president, we call, you know, I'm president. What are you president of? You know, the whatever council of the, you know, religious studies faculty on the second floor of Cock Hall. So I put on my door, president. Excuse my cynicism. Which is not to say that it couldn't be impossible that somebody would come and choose to be, you know, need to be educated, you know, pretend to need to be educated and sit in the third row, the second seat over, and ask me penetrating questions that will force me to develop my character. Right? Really? And not to say that. But then to run your culture and your government and all that around this is, well, maybe it's just as good as doing it around, you know, the mafia and, you know, criminal interests and certain powerful interests, prejudice interests. You know, I'm just, I'm not speaking from a privileged position, I hope. Yes?
I have a question about, to backtrack a little bit, talk about artificially acquired afflictions.
Wow, you caught right into that.
Well, I mean,
Yes?
I don't understand that. If you have artificial acquired obstructions or whatever, what's the opposite of that?
Innately acquired, innate. And the difference is, with the artificial, it's like going to ballet school and somebody teaching you, you are your body. And you train in it. I am my body, I am my body, I am my body. Or you go to Nazi school and, you know, you train that blue-eyed and blonde-haired people are the best. Or you go to the Jewish Academy, you know, whatever. You name it. Everybody's got of the artificial ones that we pick up in school, that we pick up in social groups, and so forth. The innate are ones that any animal, bug, human being is going to have. Easy to understand that arise spontaneously. Now, that's easy to separate out the two, right? But then when you start thinking about it, train in anything long enough and it'll arise spontaneously. And then it becomes difficult to separate them out quite often. But that's the general division. When you cognize emptiness directly, all of the educationally acquired, the artificially acquired ones are removed forever. Forever. Never to return again. Just one moment of cognition of emptiness gets rid of all of them. It gets rid of none of the innate. To get rid of the innate, then you have to keep re-entering direct cognition of emptiness. And you get rid of it in cycles of the sort of like heavier or worst. Big, middling, and small, which are divided into big, middling, and small, making 9. So, for next time, in Tantric techniques, uh, 39 to 70. (19 to 20) and 115 to 138. I think, Paul, your question is very important because the usage of the term Dugu in Tibetan society would lead you to believe that the technical term Dugu means something other than what it actually does. And you have, these two are so out of sync that you have to get over an initial misperception and then see if there's any sync that can be brought together between the way the system actually is and how the society has used the identification of it.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Yes.
I think the last set of numbers corresponds to deity of the Ithaca.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. It was Tantric Techniques 39 to 70, and then Deity Yoga 19 to 20, and 115 to 138. It's again all the same material done a few different times. So next time we're finally getting to talk about deities, the Deity Yoga.
The subject of the course.
Yes.
Valuable.